So hello everyone. Thank you for coming to our Ecocritical Pedagogy talk series. This is the third one, and there will be more people coming in, but we will just start. The guest speaker today for our event is Professor Eva Man. Professor Eva Man is currently a Kiriyama Professor of the Center for Asia and Pacific Study at the University of San Francisco. And she is Emeritus Professor of Hong Kong Baptist University. And she's very prolific. She published in comparative aesthetics, comparative psychology, women's studies, feminist philosophy, cultural studies, art, and cultural criticism. And she was a Fulbright scholar and researched at UC Berkeley. And she was named as the AMUW Endowed Women Chair Professor of the Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she contributes public service to the Hong Kong Arts Development Council, Museum Advisory Committee, NLCSD, and Home Affairs Bureau of HKSAR, and HK Jockey Club's Art and Cultural Heritage Projects. And today I have Professor Man to come to our talk series to focus more on one of the most important branch of eco-criticism, which is ecofeminism. And I like Professor Man's background because she is able to do as a philosopher, and she's able to do a comparative study of ecofeminist philosophy and I-Ching, the Book of Change. And let me see the title of her talk is A Comparative Study of Ecofeminism and the Principle of Holistic Unity of Nature. So without further ado, let's welcome Professor Man.
Yeah. Hi, thank you, Professor Zhang, for your invitation. I'm actually just visiting New York City, which is always fascinating and the dream of every artist and even philosopher. Without further ado, I would like to present this paper, and it will last around maybe 40 minutes. It may be a little technical, but I think it is necessary.
Hold on, you have to share. You need to share this kind of something.
Yeah, so yeah, can you help?
Where's the share?
So you see me on screen and also see the PowerPoint. Yeah, so I can start now. So, you can both see me and my PowerPoint. I need the PowerPoint because, there is so much to share. I just hope that the words and the images can help. So my topic is a comparative study on ecofeminism and a holistic unity view of nature, because we could see that there's a lot of agenda, especially in Confucianism and Taoism. The modality of the universe shares so much with the ideals or agenda of ecofeminism. Okay. Some people are coming in, but I will start right away. Yeah, maybe just 30 more seconds when they settle down. So I have to warn you, this presentation is basically philosophical and a bit technical. and it will definitely demand some sort of very thoughtful attention to all the technical terms involved. So I will start with the early 1970s when the theorists, the feminist theories, really questioning Western science in the modern sense. So I will start now. Since the early 1970s, theories working in the area of feminist science have questioned the historical and sociological relationships between gender and science. They point to the fact that our notions of progress are drawn from science, technology, and medicine, all of which are characterized as so-called rational, as distinct from that which is emotional. Their critique is part of a more general questioning of science and technology, which casts doubt as to whether they alone hold the solutions to the world's problems, such as environmental degradation, unemployment, and war, is still speaking to us now with this agenda. So, I have difficulties in turning to the next slide, please. Sorry. It's not working. To the next slide. Okay, great. This one. Thank you. Thank you. So along with the feminist critique from the gender perspective, you can see that there are other critical perspectives, including race and class. Usually when we do critical studies, we always talk about gender, class, race. Now, I think age is another critical perspective. So including the racial critique, just like African and Indian, of white European science, and the Marxist critique of bourgeois science. They point out that the idea of an so-called disinterested mind resulting in a pure knowledge which stands above history is simply an epistemological conceit. So drawing upon the work of thinkers such as, of course, everybody knows Michel Foucault, they adopt a genealogical approach which sees science in terms of knowledge or power constructs operating within historical frameworks. So what is reflected within science is the particular moment of struggle between social classes, races, and genders found in the actual life world. A feminist critique has shown the way in which gender-based dominance relationships have been programmed into the production, the scope, and structure of knowledge, distorting its content and also its uses and meaning. For example, feminist critiques of psychiatry and the treatment of women's depression as pathological expose the sexist biases in medical constructions of mental health and illness. So this view of medical science recognizes it as a repository of patriarchal values. Thus, a growing number of feminists are re-examining the scientific revolutions of the 16th and the 17th centuries, arguing that science and philosophy are based on the masculine constructs of reason and so-called the very problematic term objectivity. So people know Caroline Merchant's. Her study of the relationship between the scientific revolution's quest to dominate nature and the quest to dominate women is one of these examples. In her work, The Death of Nature, she draws our attention to the repeated metaphors of male domination, even rape and despoliation that characterize the writings of the fathers of the scientific revolution. Similar research also reflects the way in which the predominance of men in the sciences had led to a bias in the choice and definition of problems. So in all of this, we find a glorification of Western rationality, along with the related paradigms of science and freedom, all of which are based on the subordination of nature. I have to name it the big nature, with a capital, a beginning of nature, to a male will, and the so-called disenchantment of all the nature's forces. But that this masculinity-dominated constructs of science and technology have real-world impacts, though, can also be seen in the way technologies are linked to those capitalist modes of production, as well as modes of the production of meaning. So there are at least 3 layers of meaning of technology as a form of scientific knowledge, to know how to use things, repair them, design them, and make them, and related to it as a hardware definition, which refers to physical objects. These different meanings of technology embody a culture or a set of social relations made up of certain sorts of knowledge, beliefs, desires, and practices. Feminist theories aim to deconstruct these relations, especially in terms of the gender dimensions, carrying the seeds of an alternative ontology, epistemology, and ethics. The possibility of a different science is discussed, a science undistorted by masculinist so-called bias was attended. So what are the feminist critique of modern science? Next, we visit the terminologies adopted by Francis Bacon, the father of modern science, who exemplifies the use of sexual metaphors to express his idea that nature is female, and the task of science is the exercise of domination, so-called the male domination over her. In his words, quote, "Let us establish a chaste and noble marriage between mind and nature, knitting to you nature with all her children to bind her to your service and make her your slave," unquote. He counsels that we need not merely exert a gentle guidance over nature's course. We have the power to conquer it and subdue her, to shake her to her foundations, unquote. So I think when Francis Bacon delivered all these words, he didn't expect that they are feminist critique, in the 20th century, and that all his words will be examined. So according to the feminist reinterpretation of the tradition, the seeds of Bacon's notion of knowledge and power is already there with the Greeks. For the Greeks, knowledge already transcends matter. This is very important. The Pythagoras, of course, you know the philosopher, the Pythagoreans understood the role as principles which were related to determinate form, which was good, or indeterminate form, which was bad. So so-called determination, definition, and the formal principles are so important for them. But nevertheless, these principles were set up as a series of dualism, just say limited and unlimited, or and even, one and many, right and left, male and female, rest and motion, straight and curved, light and dark, good and bad, square and oblong. So you can see that, all these dualistic form of structure are deeply embedded in our common knowledge. So so-called the dualism thing create power as well, with those oppositional, antagonistic kind of structure, one side is always dominating the other side. So now I think the feminist critics are fighting against this form of dualism. So truth or knowledge was in the principles. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. In the same way, that Plato held that true knowledge was one of the forms, or of the forms upon which one should contemplate. As we move towards to Bacon, Francis Bacon, we find the gap between form and matter that, it is completely closed. Contemplation of form is no longer adequate. He said, who would know nature must turn away from mere ideas and abstractions and painstakingly attend to natural phenomena. The thing that we should ask ourselves is that why is it so painful to not look at natural phenomena instead of really using those kind of conceptual, schematical form of thinking? So we can say, but for Bacon, okay, I should go back to this one. But for Bacon, the aim of science is not only knowledge, when knowledge is power. The ends of knowledge are to renew and enlarge the power and empire of mankind in general over the universe. The new science are proclaimed by Bacon and prefigured in the new astrology and magic of the Renaissance magic, seeks to shift the primary focus of scientific attention away from the contemplatively perceived truth to the goal of mastery over nature, that man is both the minister and interpreter of nature. So he is everything. And knowledge is identified as power, and the idea is later developed into reason and progress, which is like the golden principle. So throughout this history, the feminists claim that a male bias manifests in the fact that active determinate form is considered to be male, while femaleness is passive indeterminate matter. I have to clarify it here that there are female scientists as well, definitely. But if they adopt this same kind of construction or the framework or even the modality, they are actually also adopting a male biases or centered kind of knowledge. So throughout the parallel dualism, which we have mentioned some in the Greek philosophy, but nowadays we also talk about it, just like culture versus nature, mind versus body, reason versus emotion, objectivity versus subjectivity, and the perfect realm versus the perfect realm. There is a dominant and sub-dominant term in between. So in each dichotomy, the former must dominate the latter, and the latter in each case seems to be systematically associated with the feminine. So the feminist critique of oppressive dichotomies extends to biological thinking of what is male, female, what is nature and culture, what is androgen, and what is estrogen, what is cognitive versus affective, left brain and right brain, etc. And this hierarchical dualism reveals one of the depths of the ways in which gender has affected the development of science. It is because of the deep and systematic penetration, let me use that word, which is sexual, penetration of these themes of dominance, that feminism calls for a total rejection of the hierarchical epistemology of modern Western science. And to look further, what does a man being a subject mean? In explication, feminists took into the notion of the Cartesian cogito, Descartes in Western philosophy, which talk about cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, which is said to express the most individual experience and the most so-called objective knowledge or truth. They hold that the Cartesian subject is basically inherently phallocratic, yet is a partially autonomous, constituting role and agency. As Ahidere said, quote, we can assume that any theory of the subject has always been appropriated by the masculine, unquote. She goes beyond this to claim that all dichotomies are both hierarchical and gendered. Thus, she rejects the epistemology that produced them. The gender character of contemporary science is summarized by feminists as follows. Number one, that women cannot be subjects but objects of study. They can only be the egoless objects of scientific study. Number two, the active knowing subject that is essential to science has been identified or defined as exclusively masculine. So the net result is the enchantment of an objectivist, so-called male ideology, and a correlative evaluation of bracket female subjectivity. The scientific intellectual interest in prediction is already seeking control, and this is seen as the highest characteristic of men or males and an expression and the fulfillment of a distinctively human potential. It is this which raises humankind above animals and men above women. This same ideology of objectivity, which asserts on opposition between so-called male objectivity and female subjectivity, denies the possibility of mediation between the two. That is problematic. And the feminists conceptualize objectivity as a dialectical process. It is not really that absolute. So we can see that there is a claim for feminist science, which is targeted at decentralized, probabilistic, non-hierarchical, hermeneutic, that means it is open for interpretation and is analogous to women's unique association with nature. While the masculine science is operated as comparative, related to absoluteness and abstraction, the feminist science should emphasize on relativity, relationship, and interrelatedness. So, I would like to give sort of summary characteristic of feminist theories of science. The adoption of the feminist scientific method would not lead to differences in scientific practice without a complete change in the relations of power within the institutions of science. To summarize the main themes of the suggested feminist theories of science, some of the main features would be as follows. Number one, that a feminist science would fuse subjective and objective ways. I have to go back, yeah. Well, would fuse the subjective and objective ways of knowing the world, enabling humanity to live in harmony with nature, and the epistemological assumption of the feminist science are ones in which no rigid boundary separates the subject of knowledge and the natural knowledge of that knowledge. Number two, that the science is not seen as an impersonal authority standing outside and above nature and human concerns, but a person whose thoughts and feelings, logical capacities, and intuitions are all relevant and involved in the process of discovery. And that nature itself is conceptualized as active rather than passive, a dynamic and complex totality requiring human cooperation and understanding rather than a dead mechanism, requiring only manipulation and control. Feminist scientists aim at cooperating with nature rather than confronting it. The claim is that we would learn more by conversing or conducting a dialogue with nature. I don't mean that it is something very easy, but the direction that we should go. And the ancient wisdom actually tells that we have started doing that thousands and thousands of years ago. Feminist critiques of Western science are working closely with environmentalists who understand the same patterns of domination as they relate to the exploitation of the natural world. They warn us of the irreversible consequences of continuing environmental exploitation and a developing and ecological ethics, emphasizing the interconnectedness between humanity and nature. This juxtaposition of the goals of the feminist and environmental movements suggests new values. So let's look at the case of ecofeminism. It is out of this fusion of feminism, environmentalism, and other liberation movements that new possibilities arise. Candidates such as I mentioned, Caroline Virgin, see ecofeminism in her term as a new term for an ancient wisdom, which embodies an integration of the liberation movements. It will be useful to give brief attention to some of its main characteristics. Number one, that ecofeminism understands that the liberation of women cannot be achieved in isolation from the larger struggle for the preservation of life on this planet. Their core is to abandon rigid dichotomies and in so doing rediscover the interdependence and connectedness of everything. This is also a revitalization to the spiritual dimension of life. Some call it the female principle, which they claim inhabits and permeates all things. It is not apart from or about the material world, but the life force in everything and in every human being. The ecological model and its associated ethics make possible a fresh and critical interpretation of the whys of modern science in which the cosmos can once again be perceived as an organism instead of as a machine. So the vision of ecofeminism has been to restore the balance of nature, emphasizing notions of progress must be balanced against the cost of progress and the limits that need to live within the cycle of nature. Ecofeminism has also exposed the cost for women and for the nature of competition in the marketplace. The loss of meaningful productive economic roles for women in early capitalist society, and the view of both women and nature as psychological and relational resources for the hurried entrepreneur, just like as businessman or a husband. As Kate Cox has noted, it is not by chance that this new spirituality should blend with environmentalism, as both share a holistic vision, a reference for life, and a commitment to a new form of community. So interestingly, the spirituality of ecofeminism unites feminism and ecology to provide a framework of action and understanding which would address the balance between masculine and feminine principles in seeking an equitable, healthy, and sustainable world. Well, very soon I will come into the case of I-Ching, but before that, I would like to add the words that feminist scholars point out the Chinese I-Ching, the Book of Changes so-called, provides a powerful example of a philosophy of life which describes the duality of existence based upon the masculine and feminine principles at the same time. The Chinese sought harmony through the balance of all these complementary aspects. In fact, threads of this philosophy have run through all cultures, finding an expression in the religious and philosophical thoughts of early Near Eastern civilizations and influencing Western mystical traditions. It is suggested that we may begin to discover values associated with the pre-modern world that may be worthy of transformation and reintegration into today's and tomorrow's society. What Joseph Lippin says about Chinese science may also support this reading. His idea is that Chinese thought is profoundly non-Cartesian and refuses to make any sharp dichotomy between spirit and matter, mind and body, energy flows, and physical sensations. It remains highly successful at an empirical level, while resisting all efforts to be defined within the categories of physiological reductionism. He also claims that Chinese physics remains impervious to mechanical materialism and atomism. It remains faithfully to their prototype wave theory of the yin and the yang and the 5 elements, translated as 5 powers in the I-Ching. So if you are familiar with the text, it said Dao Song Yi, that means, in the beginning, there's the Dao, and then Yi Song Er, and the Dao generates the yin and the yang principle, San Sheng Wan Wu, and then from the 2 principles also generate the 5 powers or the 5 elements, so-called. The 5 elements include the gold, the wood, water, fire, and also the earth. Okay? So, and from all these 5 basic elements generate everything. They are in favor of non-exclusive relationships of forces. In short, in Chinese science, human is an intimate and harmonious relationship to nature rather than so-called domination. As Joseph Needham said very explicitly, that for the Chinese, the natural world was not something hostile or evil, which had to be perpetually subdued by willpower and brute force, but it is something much more like the greatest of all living organisms, the governing principles of which had to be understood so that life could be lived in harmony with it. So, does it have the Chinese model of causality? Yes, it's true. In Chinese science or I-Ching, an ideal and relevant model for feminist cosmology and science may be detected. Let us start with the Chinese model of causality implied in I-Ching, in which three characterizing principles are found based on the metaphysical and ontological considerations suggested by the Confucianists and the Taoists. The first one is the principle of holistic unity, which is echoed with the main subject of today, that all things are one and under the Tao or happen. Thus, they all share the same nature, quality of reality, and are interrelated, just as in the family. The oneness they share both sustains and gives rise to a multitude of things. This implies that any individual thing must be understood in the whole context, which forms its background, the source, and the network of interrelations. Secondly, the principle of internal life movement. This asserts that all things in the world have an intrinsic life force which moves them and which is infinite and inexhaustible. This energy for movement is intrinsic, as in an organism, different from being extrinsic as a machine. So all things are interrelated to form a network of interchange of processes. As Wang Chong in the 1st century AD concludes, quote, things move because of their belonging to the natural kinds, not because of striving and purpose, unquote. Lastly, the principle of organic balance. All things and processes in the world are related in processes which proceed towards a balance and a harmony, and be there all the changes and transformation. So for the yin-yang polarities, it's not actually polarities. There is a mutual generative and destructive, so-called modes of the 5 powers in the I-Ching, with the contrary and complementary qualities as well as an illustration. This leads to one to evaluate things and happenings by considering the negative and positive directions of change, so they may seem to fit into a reality of balanced relationship. But on the other hand, it's ever moving and changing. So you think it is in harmony, next moment, there are contradiction, and next moment, harmony again in a new level. So in the above holistic consideration, Chinese causality is assumed under the so-called relative thinking, as formulated by Joseph Needham. Both the philosophy of change and its symbolic system based on the I-Ching and the free will of 5 powers provide a number of coordinate categories capable of correlating all processes in the world, including the natural, social, and historical events. So it is not only happening in the environment, in the universe, or in nature, it's also in human societies. This explains the famous principle of the correspondence of heaven and man, by which the objective and the subjective are not absolutely demarcated, but intimately related. That man, the subject, is assumed to be able to participate in the way of nature. Moreover, we can say the general principles governing changes are basically dialectical. I really like the term dialectical because not only that it is predictable or really not predictable, but that it is in harmony. So this model of causality in Chinese philosophy is exactly contrary and converse to the mechanical atomistic model of the 18th to 19th century European science. The Chinese model of causality is basically reflective of the concrete experience of life, history, and time, whereas the Western scientific model reflects abstract thinking and quantitative calculation. In the I-Ching, there are always two opposite but complementary forces or momenta in the process of change. They are the yin, which is also referred to as the female principle force aspect, representing the receptive and the potential. And the yang, which is the male principle force aspect, representing the creative and the actual. Difference and differentiation of things are manifestations of the interaction of the yin and the yang. These general polarities are also exemplified by cold and hot, hard and soft, rest and movement, high and low, but they do not exhibit any genuine opposition or antagonism. They are also only opposite as far as they are complementary. It is said that they exist to make reality interesting, meaningful, and complementary. There is no tension nor hostility in between. So according to the I-Ching, the world is a process of change and development. Despite the appearance of variation, difference, divergence, tension, oppositions, and antagonism, the overall tendency of the cosmic and social processes as well, and individual life, move towards unity and a state of holistic harmonization of things. All forms of polarities are just symbolic of harmony in a dynamic sense. So we have to really bring further. The process of change is conceived as a generative unity of polarities which exists in opposition as well as in complementation. That appearance of discrepancy, imperfection, conflict, contradiction or struggle are regarded as misconceived and incomplete sub-processes of interaction of polarities. Moreover, conflict is a manner of humans' inability or weakness to conform to reality and to appreciate the intricacies of change. Of course, there are conflicts in life. Conflict can be avoided if one strives to conform with nature by cultivating one's understanding and adjusting one's action in a proper way. This adjustment can also be called a process of harmonization. To conclude, according to the metaphysics of harmony and conflict in the I-Ching, presence of antagonism demands a moral and practical transformation of humans themselves. So let's come to the last part, is some comparative considerations. So what feminists are striving for as a result of the critique of Western scientific tradition is a woman's spirituality which unites feminism and ecology. From this integration emerges a framework of action, understanding, and meaning for a progressive eco-feminist vision. That vision aims to redress so-called balance between masculine and feminine principles in seeking an equitable, healthy, and sustainable world. So in this respect, the Chinese I-Ching, which has much in common with the real new vision, can provide us with a cross-cultural resource and reference. However, some feminists are very cautious about this kind of suggestion. That is it a naive return to a pre-modern, pre-capitalistic, and Eastern scientific model of cosmology? Their warnings and criticism are as follows. Number one, that the idea of nature is itself culturally constructed. It is true that African, Aboriginal, and Chinese have concepts of nature quite different from dominant European ones. Their worldviews posit a more harmonious relationship between mankind and the living universe of nature, with striking parallels what is claimed to be a distinctively feminine worldview. However, it is difficult to claim that a holistic approach which refers to culture as a whole is gender-specific. So gender-specific is always the challenge issue. Second, because in the West, the spiritual aspects of life have been eroded, it is understandable that people would turn to the East with its pre-industrial traditions in the search of what has been destroyed in their own culture. But as long as the interest in so-called the Oriental spiritualism fails to integrate this search for wholeness into a critique of the existing exploitative world system, it can easily be co-opted and neutralized. Examples are the New Age and the esoteric movements, which have created a new market for meditation, yoga especially, and alternative health practices as a new form of commodity in the world market. That means they are just, commodity, they are output of commodification. And the third challenge is that postmodernism calls for a redefinition of knowledge that displaces the relative or absolute dichotomy and identifies all knowledge as cumulative. It rejects the meta-narrative of the rationalist conception of science while resisting the temptation to formulate another one. Therefore, as Sandra Harding has pointed out, if the new feminist epistemology is to act as a successor science project, which claims to provide a better, truer picture of reality, there is the possibility that Chinese and feminist values will become one more just meta-narrative. So it is said that, in fact, 20th century or 21st century science has shown a marked tendency to abandon the certainty implicit in Enlightenment conceptions, such as Newtonian physics. Lastly, the least but not the last, that I think I-Ching involves a religious belief in the metaphysical realm, which is genuine before it can be regarded as a reference or a tool. That means if you don't believe in it, if you don't think that will find any sense in it, there's no transformation at all. So it is just, in the form of a religion. Is that true? So in spite of this criticism and limitations, feminist theories do provide us with a perspective on conventional conceptions of science that may carry a liberating potential for science, which is worthy of further investigation and discussion. I think this is very safe to say in this way. These are my understanding of the main agenda of ecofeminism, which definitely involve a different modality in terms of the view of the cosmos and our universe and definitely our nature. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Mark, for this wonderful talk on comparing and contrasting the 1918 and 19th century science studies and a critique from a feminist perspective, and provided with alternative sort of science vision from the Asian perspective, using the I-Ching's wisdom and to deconstruct this kind of polarized, competing sort of idea of the masculine and the feminine, and using the more sort of a holistic model, which is more the idea of the yin and yang principle is intermingling. It's kind of dynamic dualism that is not polarized, but is constantly in the process of becoming. And I-Ching is the foundation of Chinese civilization. It influenced all the thousands of years of Chinese lives and psyche and society and every corner of and now it's also very influential in the Western sort of intellectual or psyche. I have some, ecofeminism has so many different branches, ideas, and it has gone through so many different stages of changes. some of the ecofeminists are more Marxist or materialist, and some is more prone to a more spiritual ones that you're talking about. And let me see. Well, one form of ecofeminism is actually more sort of anti-science, you know, sort of the idea of the science alliance with science is an act of complicity. So you know, you see that in the Princess Mononoke the Japanese animation that you probably, I don't know how many of you have seen that one. So that actually present a very good, interesting contrast between two forms of ecofeminism, or the portrayal of the feminist ecofeminism in that film is a totally rejection of technology and science, Western science, right? And the whole idea of a return to nature, identification with the animal, with nature, with wilderness, and you know, and rejection of human civilization. Okay, and here Professor Mann is providing another sort of vision of it seems to me is like, okay, we are in the age of the Anthropocene, you know, the age of human, where everything has become manufactured. There's no way we can escape technology or science. Even, you know, the whole idea of going to the pristine nature is just a myth, right? Because, you know, everything is artificial now. So how do we reconceptualize or to work with science, right? And providing, you know, providing a more alternative feminist vision or feminist version model of scientific practice or technological sort of vision is something we really have to think about. So I think that I don't know if translating it into a more practical sense. I wonder if there is a sort of I-Ching informed scientific practice in you know, or architectural design, or you know, because technology can apply to so many in a broader, everything's technology, right? So the man-made, you know, practice is actually, in a way, it's a technology. So I wonder, you know, just as we think of the Western capitalism has commercialized so many Eastern traditions, spiritualities, that we pay $20 to go to the yoga, studio to practice yoga, right? And take yoga out of Indian cultural historical context, right? And that is a form of a consumption. It's called spiritual materialism, right? And this is definitely that kind of sort of the vision of appropriation of Asian culture we want to see, right? And I see that in meditation as too. So, you know, when we're so stressed, we have a lot of psychological problems, psychology, anxiety, and then we go to a meditation class to relieve our anxiety so that we can go back to better serve, you know, capitalism, right? So in a way, Eastern, you know, like Zizek was actually, you know, criticizing it, that Asian traditions, ancient pre-modern Asian tradition has become a complicit, you know, play this kind of complicit role in serving this capital machine that is driving our planet crazy, right? So I'm actually just wondering, you know, and I haven't seen much of how do you, I haven't seen a lot of, maybe I'm wrong, but, you know, a lot of appropriating, commercializing I-Ching, you know, maybe it's because I-Ching, the philosophy is so complicated. It's not something easy to digest. So in a way, it protects itself from this kind of easy sort of commercialization. So in a way, it's a form of resistance. But I would like to see in the future a more, you know, more deeper thinking about, you know, alternative form, you know, a form that is different from the capitalist model, right? Of incorporating, you know, the ancient wisdom of I-Ching into Chinese, into world civilization, or, you know, technological vision, if we cannot escape from it. So I wonder if Professor Mann has any sort of ideas or suggestions on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Professor Zhang has named the basic things that the feminist ecologists have been very aware of. To say capitalization of women's labor, commodification of some sort of ancient wisdom, providing some sort of alternative products in the market, the green stuff, and then the organic, the whole food, everything. I see no harm in doing that. We do need diversity instead of just eating DNA modified tomatoes, right? And so they're clean, they are big, they are sweet, but the point is we want to have some sort of natural stuff. I think diversity is important, freedom, liberation is important. And if we stagnate onto or fixated onto something, just like the medical science in such a way, we see no harm that we definitely should need alternative, just so-called treatment. What is it called? I mean, to say if you're a cancer patient, instead of taking all those things that kill your cells, homeotherapy,
Alternative medicine.
yeah, and then my university just set up the first Chinese medical hospital in Hong Kong, and it is not based on quantifying research, but how the Chinese medical doctor work with you. They touch your hand, then they feel how your qi circulate. They know which part of your body has problem. It's amazing. So the issue is, if we are fixated in that kind of dualism, or just say human body as object, the medical technology, the implementation as subject, all this, is just like a power structure. So the point is, we can let the material, the body, the subject works and heal themselves, because we have a lot of healing potentials. So I see a lot of good things about it, and that not one replace another. But I think what I find I-Ching revealing is to our lives. Just say we have success and failure, we have ups and downs, and we feel happy in one moment, very depressed in the next moment. But when all these, oppositional contradictions, power struggles happen, we should see it as a sub-process. It's not your whole life, but something have to be in between, have this kind of struggles before you reach a harmony again, before you can actualize your potential once again, when you have confidence into your existential living once again. So, it provides a really holistic point of view, is that something happened in between in a certain stage of your life is something that had to happen, but it is a process, and it doesn't mean that you will stay in that state forever. So I-Ching, that's exactly why I-Ching has a lot of wisdom. I want to show the diagram, which is so complicated. When Professor Zhang asked me if I'm an I-Ching expert, or maybe she would ask me, or when she will have I'm just joking, a study base or promotion. It's not that I can predict, something that will happen. It's so complicated, but it carries some sort of principles that are working. Yeah. So, and maybe one thing that I cannot say in this lecture because of time constraint is kind of with morality. Yeah, you really have to be a moral human being before the I-Ching work on you. Yeah, this to reduce the conflicts and let it flow.
Yeah.
But I cannot go into that area now. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for providing a vision, explanation of technology, expand outside of our narrow definition of technology. Like agriculture is a form of technology too, right? So I actually haven't really thought about that, and this is where I-Ching could probably apply to medical humanities. Thinking in holistic medicine, think of human body in a more holistic way. And as an eco-critic, I always like to go back to the issue of climate change.
Is there questions?
Oh yeah, I've got a lot of questions. So I'm gonna finish this in 1 minute, and I'll switch to your questions. And okay, thank you. And one of the characteristic of climate change is uncertainty, and it's unpredictability, and it's becoming. We cannot predict what's going on. So I think the wisdom of I-Ching, one thing if I-Ching ever teach us is nothing stay the same. Our way of life, capitalist ways of life, won't last forever. So we have to really adapt to change. And I-Ching's wisdom that actually emphasize change. The feminine principle will not stay feminine, and feminine is not a pure feminine. It's always a little bit of masculinity inside, and they intermingling, it constantly co-evolving, and that actually is the home for conceptualizing diversity and change. So we really have to. If we cannot escape dualism, then we have to come up with a different type of dualism to rethink about relationship with nature. And that's probably the way that we can get out of our Anthropocene crisis. Okay, so now let me just switch to our questions. But let me first give the question to our floor. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Professor Steele, please.
Sure. Thanks for your talk. I'm not sure if people can hear me over there, or if I should approach the microphone.
Why don't you come over here so that it can be recorded too?
Very quick. I'll try to make this as quick as possible because I have to go teach pretty soon. Thanks for your talk so much. I'm put in mind of the work of Karen Barad, Meeting the Universe Halfway, who's a quantum physicist and thinks with quantum physics along the lines of feminist science studies that you're describing here, or work Animacies by Mel Chen, which is kind of doing a feminist eco-criticism, also thinking about the new materialism. So I think there are works like that that play very well with your talk, as well as Stacey Alimo's Bodily Natures, which we heard about in the last talk. But my question, and I suppose this is from a more materialist or even Marxist standpoint, is your talk is implicitly linking I-Ching with ecofeminism and seeing them as somehow aligned in their conceptualization of nature. And I'm wondering about the feminist reading of I-Ching, because it doesn't seem to me that more holistic or less binary conceptions of nature have any predictive value for the reduction of gender oppression, which seems to me to be the primary feminist goal. And that, so I think there's a sense that we're talking about concepts, changing concepts and valuing certain concepts over other concepts. But I'm wondering whether this has any material effect on improving the condition of women.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes. I think all material changes or transformation or the relational modality change, starting from I don't want to use the term ideology, it's very Marxist.
Yeah.
It's basic from our worldview, our view of the universe and our view of our life. And I think if everything is really so functional, so outcome-based, it actually have to start from the very beginning is the value system. Yeah, to say if you detect some sort of oppression or power domination that exists because of the dualism or dichotomy relationship, then if you are one of the, well, you're the subject of one side, either you are the one being oppressed or you are the oppressor. As I-Ching suggested that it involved an ethical and value transformation of yourself, that you have to think about when I'm in such an antagonistic position to someone or of another gender, of another class, of another age group, then I really have to think about whether this contradiction should last or whether I should still implementing that hierarchy. And then that is the light or the silver lining of so-called in practice, in application, the change of the gender relation. Yeah, so I think the wisdom of I-Ching is to tell you the foundation, the philosophical foundation, the worldview, which I think is related to what Professor Zhang has been organizing, the ecofeminism or the ecofeminism critique.
Well, thank you so much for the question and answer. That I know that Professor Steele is a post-humanist scholar, so I leave this kind of very deconstructed question to him. Like, you know, I think I know this kind of a dualistic conception of ecofeminism or I-Ching still has to answer to face up the challenge from the queer studies and other branch of feminism or ecofeminisms. But you know, and this is that makes the dialogue and conversation very interesting. So we should definitely keep on having those conversations. And now let me move to questions. Can you come over here? I don't see. This is the first one. Okay. Okay, we have a question from Professor Namalanda Florence. Okay, do you see any relationship to the philosopher / educator John Dewey's critique of Platonic Cartesian dualism in knowledge, conception, and creation, as well as links between knower / subject and the known / object? Dewey maintains that the humans and nature are all organisms in a shared environment.
Thank you for this very inspiring and sophisticated question. We always have, the feminists love to criticize Descartes so much. And everything started from there, that Descartes was named as a wheelchair philosopher. That means when his very famous notion, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, that means he did not need to relate to anyone. He sit in a room and think that, well, the only thing I can show about knowledge is that when I'm in the thinking process, that's so true, so real to me, and then nothing else. Right? So we all know that Descartes is a mathematician and he's very good in logic, so-called, in place of rationalism, we will talk about Descartes. But the I-Ching actually provided, if you look at the hazard, is that everything is related, everything has a core, and from the core it generates, and they interact with each other, it will change. Just say it's changed so much that you can never say as something stated as eternal, So in this case, we see hopes, but the hopes rely on our ethical transformation. So I think the basic agenda is how we relate to each other. How you relate to your enemy. Your enemy won't be forever. We don't have eternal enemies, as we were told. And sometimes we create lovers and enemies because of interest. And when the interest ground change, your enemy become your friend, your lover become your enemies, right? So it's true, but the point is, you always have to reflect on yourself. What I think will agree with Descartes is that the ethical self is always, it's not only you think, therefore you are, you reflect ethically, therefore you are. So with the ethics come into the position, come into the scene, it means interrelatedness to others. This is the wisdom of I-Ching. Without that, the power will dominate because we just maintain, exclude something, marginalize something as our object. I should stop here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Thank you. So let me quickly move on to other question. Do you have, okay, so another question from Christina Cordero. Do you have, how do you envision cultivating lasting and productive conversation between the realm of ecofeminism and the huge world of qualitatively and statistically oriented people, such as the world of Western engineering, medicine, science, who are so out of touch with this way of seeing the world and our place in it.
Yeah, very good. Very good. And sometimes, you know, we try to idealize artists as well as scientists, that they are very different. They, of course, in Greek philosophy, they know the logos, the logo, the logo of the world, and that only human beings as rational animals can grasp the logic. Logic actually is the principle of the logo in the world. So we, in place of science and also in place of artists, that because they are so special, they have such talented abilities, we should nurture them, we should support them. So why for married an artist, I'm talking about myself, yes. Married an artist, you know, he is nurturing brilliant creative idea, so I should just cook and serve him and wash his clothes. I mean, not joking, yeah, but actually I'm joking too. I think they are not really that isolated from the world. They are also very, I mean, they are not disinterested subjects. They are interested people. Look at how medicine in the United States dominate. You know, what kind of pills you should take. And now I'm trying the NMN because it activates my cell and it's on the market on Amazon. You know, you can immediately order some of those. And then, you know, they are interested, you know, they're not really separated. So because they dominate, because they are so interested, related. So, how could feminist people do? So, you know, the very sad scene is that whenever feminists raise some sort of agenda, it leads to some alternative product, and then the product is on the market. You know, so because you buy these ideas, you know, sometimes maybe we should ask, how could we get away from the commodification of the world? And but still, as educators, as philosophers, as students, you know, when we are studying undergraduate, graduate studies, it's like a protected one. We definitely need to think more about it. And then the seed was inside, and we really participate in the industry. We have a limit. It's again echo with the I-Ching, so-called ethical transformation. So I cannot say this is a giant. It is a giant, but if it's forever being the giant, according to I-Ching, they will fail anyway. So it's just a process. So maybe we should look for what will be replaced. I mean, and what is the subject of replacement, and that will not last too. So I think everything happened because we did think about it, we did challenge it. Yes.
Well, your answer sort of remind me of, I think it's probably Frederick Jameson's talking about that humanity might go away, but not capitalism. But thanks to I-Ching's teaching that if nothing stays, so probably capitalism will have to go too someday. So is that the last question? Yeah, that's the last question. So do we have other questions from the floor? No?
I have a question.
Yes.
And thank you, Professor.
Do you want to come over here? Thank you. This is our the Chinese instructor.
Yes.
Yeah. Xu 老师, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Yes, it's very informative, you know, and interesting, inspiring. And I believe that sure that the most students of the classes that I teach are here, you know, right? And so they found it's very interesting, you know. And my question is too, you know, it's very basic, simple, because we often talk about the, you know, among the students talking about the qi, the energy, which is the perfect governing energy that balance. But what's the relationship between the yin yang and the qi energy? Is it are they the same thing when the yin and yang join together that comes the energy? You know, how are they affected if they are interrelated? Yeah. The question is, who created yin yang balance? It's very simple. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It is a very interesting question because we have a basic question whether Chinese philosophy has the same form of creationism like in the West or in the Christianity, that God makes everything, okay? And even in Bible, we will say, 太初有道, and then Tao generates everything. And then, but Tao is God, in Christian sense. But the same form of creationism does not really exist in Chinese, but we do have a myth called, 我创作什么的，有一个女的叫女娲。Yeah, we do, but this is very different. It's not that I say it, it happened. We never challenge so much about the existence of the yin yang and the Tao itself, because it is just like a religion that we believe that it happened, heaven and Tao. I don't see a lot of difference, really that radical difference between Confucianism and Taoism, especially the Beijing, 先陈哲学, the 儒家哲学. The Beijing Confucianism and Taoism actually speak to each other so much that they respect the heaven and respect the Tao, and they didn't ask, who generates you. They never have that kind of question, like the medieval philosophers, Thomas Aquinas, those people who raised this sort of question. So the Qi, vital force, we say Qi. Some sinologists before translate Qi as air, but definitely this is not air. Air, you can really analyze its components, but vital force is itself an abstract thing. So you cannot measure Qi, is it oxygen, nitrogen, it's not about that. But it is a principle of Tao. It has 道生一，一生二嘛. The 二 is the yin and yang. And when the yin and yang, you see this figure that they actually interact with each other and move so much. And then with the 5 elements, the gold, the water, the fire, the wood, and the earth, yes. And then they generate all things. So Qi, the vital force, is the movement. It's actually quite like Aristotle's philosophy, when he talk about the cause of the cosmos. It's the actuality of things that generates all the differences. But some of those things vanish. So we will say, when Qi get together, a life is formed. But when Qi dissipates, life is gone. So when I'm about to die, we will say, well, my Qi has reached its limit. It's going to go away, dissipate. So it's everywhere. The vital force is an abstract form that we cannot measure, but actually the actual life is working in our body, is also working in the nature. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the explanation. Actually, your account of Qi reminds me one of the article that one of the research I did a long time ago about how Qi would become demoted, during the time when Western colonialism started to invade China, and has something to do. The story has to do with the missionary, Matteo. Actually, Matteo, I forgot how to say his name, is an Italian missionary who came to China to meet with the emperor. And the literati or aristocratic people during that time were very excited about learning Western science. And Matteo, the missionary who tried to bring Christianity to China, realized that the Chinese people believe in something that is not God. It's very strange. It's something called Qi, and it has this kind of semi-divine character. It's not a human. It does not have a God image. And how do I sort of brainwash or colorize those people with Christianity? By demoting Qi as one of the scientific elements, like air. And that's why in Kongqi, air, Chinese Kongqi, we air, like in Chinese air, Kongqi, we have the Qi in it. So the younger generation, okay, nowadays, your understanding of Qi is very different from the pre-modern time. Qi is almost like God, has some kind of Godhead. the quality, the personality in it. But now we reduce Qi as a scientific, it's just air, it's CO2 with, O2 with all these gases. So, to understand the Chinese metaphysics or I-Ching or, other Confucian philosophy, that we have to really sort of bring back this. I think this probably should be the eco-feminist project of bringing back the sacredness or that kind of, sort of, or the scientific project, or how do you say that? Bring back the sacred elements of Qi that is in all of us, that's permeating the universe, rather than just a scientific, all the elements that we could use to create more, machines or weapons to kill each other or things like that. All right, any other questions or comments?
Gerald, we have a hand raised in the.
Oh, please. Would you want to come over here, please?
Oh.
Wonderful.
No, they're on Zoom. They're on Zoom. Yeah.
Oh, on Zoom.
Yeah, we already answered them.
Yes, you may speak.
Yeah, so I know that some Chinese people, they believe that yin is like female and yang is for male. So, and sometimes yin is like negative and yang is positive. So I would like to ask how they're different and how they relate together.
Thank you.
To be very efficient in terms of time, I think active and passive is one of the way to look at the relation between yin and yang, but maybe we should also limit yin as potentiality and yang as actuality. This is certainly quite echo with Aristotle's theory as well, only that it's maybe not that reactivity in the same way as I-Ching. So, but have to remind you that it's not forever or fixated, as I say, they never want to essentialize or define things because it's always forever in a changing process, just like our body. Our body is forever in changing process. That the terrible saying is that once you were born, you are migrating to death. It's not something we really want to hear. I understand, of course, that is going that way. And then the mother started to say, oh, I lost my baby, she's growing up so fast. But actuality is a way of acting as yang, but a potentiality yin actually is supporting it. But the point is we have to be very careful because it is in equity. That means it is not always in a supportive role. Without yin, the yang cannot work or move. And then without the moving force, the yin cannot be actualized. So I won't say positive or negative, passive or active, because they just like if you look at the sign in between, they're moving together. So this is the interesting thing about how the I-Ching describe yin yang wu dong, yin yang wu gu, the complementary forces.
Well, thank you so much, and I'll quickly move to Namalanda, but I just want to ask something that it's very interesting. The very question you ask, it's coming from a Western sort of assumption of positivity is better. Okay, I would use that. I would use a more of a Zen, a Buddhist idea of a shunyata, emptiness or negativity. Actually, it's a foundation. Like the Indians invented the idea of zero, nothing. In the West, there's no concept of zero or nothingness until they were exposed to the Asian or traditional Indian culture. So you have to understand the idea of wu, nothingness. The Tao it comes from nothingness. This is actually the fundamental. The Western science is based on the substantialism, substance, atoms. But Asian foundation civilization is founded on negativity, nothingness, emptiness, shunyata, wu wei, Tao, non-action. Okay, but now we are into this kind of Western model way of thinking. So we think positivity is the yang is actually, it's dominant, is actually is positive, is a better, but actually in Asian tradition is a reversed. Okay, Namalinda, what is the question? I don't have that question with me.
Thank you. I hadn't.
It's on Zoom. Okay.
I hadn't posted the question. I wanted to say thank you very much for organizing this, and thank you to Professor Mann as well. I listened to the talk, and I was noting when she said every culture in different ways has this concept of whatever it is that we don't have a word for. And some of us, call it the sacred, but it's there. There's that deep need, both as a community and as an individual, to connect, to stay connected. And even though we've moved on to technology and we have technological gadgets that we rely on, there's still that yearning in us for that, whatever it is. We still want to go back to it. So we never quite lose it. And I think just having a platform like this is a testament in itself, but there's more. And sometimes we look at our environment and we think, oh, we've lost it. No, we haven't, because in this world, at this time, as we speak, there are people who are deeply involved in this very concept. We may have lost our way, but we know it's there. You can't get away from it because you're part of it. You're embraced in it. It defines us. I also love very much what Professor Mann said. When you say, oh, I'm having a good day, that doesn't define you, or I'm having a bad day, that doesn't define you, or I've lost my child. No, there's more to life than that. To understand that, because that's what change is about. It's knowing that there's more, that no experience, any particular experience is a laminated identity of who I am. And to leave ourselves open to that change, open to that receptivity of loving and being loved, of caring and being cared for, that we provide for nature, but nature provides for us, that it isn't about a hierarchical in the dependent relationship. No, it isn't, because that's what I think we fall prey to. We think we as the knowers, as the subject, we make things. But look at the pandemic, it shows us we don't have control over everything. Look at the floods, everything that's happening, your climate change. We don't have control. We thought we did. But yet that is life. That uncertainty. It's everywhere, but it's okay. Because it's a journey. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's so beautifully said. Yeah, it's definitely much, much deeper than our personal, the chi or whatever that is, the invisible force or whatever you call it, in very different various cultures, it's definitely deeper in us, and we have no control over it. That's so true. Well, if we don't have other comments or questions, I think is it about time? Okay, so let's thank Professor Mann again for this wonderful talk. All right. So thank you everyone for coming to this talk, and this is the end of the talk series. And next semester we will have another guest speakers coming. So please stay tuned. Thank you. Okay, bye bye.